The Hard Rock Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence here on the Hard Rock Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. We are back for another week of great rock and metal, and it was a great week indeed. We're talking about the music of April the 17th, and this week was loaded with good music. So when we paste the playlist in a little bit, you're definitely going to want to check that out, because there was a lot of really good releases this week. So we had to narrow it down to two, which we will do. But, of course, Mike will give you the rundown on some of the other releases going on. Of course, we'll have a couple classic albums in the vault as well this week as we close in on Sonic Temple, which is coming up very, very soon. Joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. And, yeah, so much good music this week. I can't remember how many I actually got around to listening to the entirety of. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 albums, which that might be a record for me, but it was really hard to narrow down to one selection. And even after I did, to no fault of that album, I still kind of found myself thinking, wait, maybe I should have picked a different one. But yeah, it's definitely not a bad thing. We'll hope that continues moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. It was a really strong April the 17th, middle of the month, clearly brought a lot of big, heavy-hitting releases. We're going to be talking about that on the podcast. Just a reminder, join the Discord. We've got that pinned in both the YouTube and the Twitch chats. That's where you'll find out any changes to our schedule, any different programming we'll have for you, and just regular discussion about all things that we cover throughout the year. And we'll be covering more of those things coming soon, so make sure you stay tuned. Joining the Discord, a great way to find out first when and where we will be showing up. Typically, it is for our music podcast this Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. We'll be back here again next Sunday night as well, with the music of April the 24th coming up next week, so we hope you will join us once again. It's time to get to the new music for this week, which means it's time for me to paste the playlists into the chat that Mike has put together, and he goes through and takes a couple of different sources and will go through and try to find the best new rock and metal from a given date. Of course, the date in question this week is April the 17th, and then he will find a track from each of the new albums that are coming out on that date, and he will put them in a YouTube playlist, which you will now see in both of the chats. Definitely encourage you to go through that. There was a lot of really good stuff. There's going to be probably more stuff than we even talk about, honestly, because it was just a really, really good week for music. So obviously, we encourage you to check out the bands that we're going to talk about, but I really think you should go through the whole playlist this week. Some really interesting stuff, and I think people will really dig what's out there. Before we get to the stuff we did pick, of course, we kind of go through some of the other things on the list, and this is a week in particular where we had lots of really good stuff to talk about. We had some really interesting names of bands out there, and going to be some interesting stuff. So kind of start off with the odds and ends of the playlist from April the 17th. What'd you have, Mike?
Yeah, before I get into that, I did have a couple of little minor notes of things that I noticed throughout the week that I thought I would bring up as well. Yeah, I don't know if you saw the story, but I saw several articles come out talking about Blue Dot Fever. Did you see that?
I did not.
It's basically this term that they use to explain why certain major acts have been canceling tour dates. Evidently, the blue dots being the empty seats when you go to your ticket purchasing app. But yeah, I guess Post Malone, Meghan Trainor, Zayn, Jelly Roll, Pussycat Dolls, all been affected by this, where they've canceled stops due to low ticket sales. And to tie it into what we do, I just think there are so many other options out there for you to spend your money. Smaller venues, newer, less known acts that it would be hard for me to warrant paying top dollar for some of these major acts when I know what's out there that's more accessible, really.
Well, and it also ties into another subject area that we talk about from time to time on our podcast, and that is pro wrestling. And a big storyline right now, not a storyline in a wrestling sense, but a storyline in the industry, is how expensive WWE tickets are. They have basically priced out the average fan, especially for these big events like WrestleMania. So you're seeing a little bit of that there as well. I mean, I just went golfing today for the first time this year, and one of the people I went golfing with had thought they had gotten a deal online for 18 holes with a cart. When we got there, it turned out evidently that deal wasn't valid or whatever, so we ended up paying $60 for 18 in a cart. And to me, and I know that part of this is not really in my mind keeping up with the price increases of rounds of golf. But like when I think of that number, I think of the Grizzly course over at Kings Island that for a long time was like 60, and that seemed like, well, that's outrageous.
I can't fathom what that would be now.
Yeah, I mean that's probably $100 or more for an 18-hole round. But the thing is, like, this course wasn't $60 nice in my mind. So
Sure.
It's one of those things, you have a level of expectation, and that kind of, to spin it back around toward the concert situation, a lot of these acts that are doing lots of shows in the same general area, in the past, maybe tickets would have been priced reasonably enough that, like, if your favorite band was hitting Cincinnati and Columbus, you might go see both of those shows. Now it's like you kind of have to choose. Like, you're probably not going to do both. So one of those shows might do really well ticket-wise, and the other one maybe not so much. And I think we're going to see more of that, I think, as things go forward.
I think also, too, you have to question what you're actually paying for.
Yeah.
'Cause I think, to me, being a hard rock and metal fan, there's something there to see. Like, the live performance is going to have a different energy, I guess, than what you get on the album. And I just wonder for some of these acts if it's really worth it. But it just makes you wonder.
Yeah, and obviously, a lot of the bands and acts you mentioned are not necessarily ones I'm fans of, so I would say no, they're not worth it. But I just don't know, like, where's the repeat draw, really? Like, if you see Pop Act X, now, I understand, like, your biggest pop acts are probably always going to sell, and I know there's top country acts that are the same way. I think there was somebody who just came through this area who's been playing these big football stadiums and they sell out. But like that, those are the outliers. Like those are not every band. And so you're going to see more of these cancellations. I mean, Eddie Trunk, and if you have never like really listened to, I would encourage you to find, you probably can do a YouTube search for Eddie Trunk talking about, the math behind tickets and tours and things like that, because he's got a really good perspective on, why some tours do well and make money and others don't really do well at all. And it's because now a lot of these acts, probably their hardcore audience are the only ones buying the albums. What are you really touring for? Because you're not really touring for exposure anymore, because the fans that have found you.
Yeah.
So it's, how do you make the numbers really add up there?
Yeah, I would be curious to see how all that works out for bands of kind of all tiers, because I'm sure it looks vastly different from Post Malone to a metal band that's released 2 albums.
Yeah, for sure. And that metal band's going to be playing at, Bogarts.
Yeah.
They're not going to be touring at even mid-sized venues like Riverbend, where it would be a lot more difficult to, you're not making as much money off of Bogarts, but you also don't have as much gear.
Yeah,
you're not
overhead's totally different.
Totally different. So, and you're probably traveling in a small bus, maybe even a van, honestly, from city to city. So, different math. But I mean, it is an interesting phenomenon and one to keep an eye on, because obviously we're getting into the prime concert season. The weather is finally getting nice.
About time.
And finally. So I'm kind of curious to see, do we hear more of these type of cancellations, and maybe even more concerning, giant festivals that decide they really can't make it, and they end up kind of packing it in as well.
The festival thing's kind of another animal too, because I saw, I think this weekend was Welcome to Rockville, maybe.
Yep.
And I saw people talking about certain acts being canceled due to bad weather, and it's like, that's another gamble there too. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I think I saw a picture of Kevin Owens at Welcome to Rockville.
Not surprising.
Not surprising at all. But that's, you got an outdoor festival. You hope for good weather. And obviously, like Sonic Temple's that next weekend.
Yeah.
You're gambling in Ohio with May weather, which could be really gorgeous like it was today and perfect. It could be really hot.
It could also be Florida. You never know.
It also could rain for 4 days straight. So you're, figure out if it kind of works out. But yeah, interesting point that we're going to have to kind of keep an eye on as we go forward.
And one other quick tidbit. Did you see the news about WKRP?
I did.
I thought that was kind of interesting that, here we are in Southwest Ohio, so it's local to us, that a 3-station network running out of Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, and Dayton bought the call letters, and they're going to be operating as WKRP, like, completing the prophecy or something.
Yeah. We could spend a whole episode talking about radio and radio conglomerates and my feelings, and I think I've mentioned them before about kind of what these consolidations of these companies did to the radio business. It's been bad and is not going to go away anytime soon. But something like that it seems like a no-brainer. I don't know why that didn't happen before.
Sooner,
I assume somebody must have owned the rights to those call letters and they finally expired.
I think I saw somewhere that some nonprofit in like North Carolina or something owned them and was looking to dump them, and these guys stepped in or something like that. It's really odd, but it should have happened decades ago, obviously.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see like what they do with them other than just naming your 3-station conglomerate. Like, are you going to sell merch?
You have to. If you're not making money off it, what are you doing?
Right, and like, how does that work? Because you have to assume whatever company had the rights to WKRP, the TV show, like what kind of rights do they still hold? Do you have to work with them? Like,
who knows?
Because that's, I think, the other real question is how much can you monetize it without running the risk of somebody? I don't even know who would even own the rights at this point. Maybe I don't think it'd be public domain just yet because it was from the late 70s, but it would be interesting to see kind of how that works. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of a cool thing. WKRP in Cincinnati, I think, for people of a certain age, and that age is probably just a little older than us because it aired in the late 70s and the early 80s, was an introduction into rock music. It was an introduction to a lot of very famous people that were going to go on and do huge things in the industry. And then, of course, they had the episode about the Who tragedy at Riverfront Coliseum because they had festival seating and they didn't open enough gates, and people kind of got trampled trying to get to their seats, and a lot of people died. And it basically, we've talked about it before, so I won't talk about it too far at length, but it really kept a band like, Metallica out of Cincinnati for a long time because Metallica is very much known for doing festival seating, and Cincinnati wouldn't let anybody come to town to do festival seating after the Who tragedy, which is understandable after something like that.
And now bands just don't come to Cincinnati because Columbus and Cleveland are just better markets, apparently.
Yeah, and obviously they got the new venue downtown. I think it looks like they're building something new near Riverbend. So like there's more of these venues, and obviously, and we won't get too far into because I'm sure people who don't live in Cincinnati won't care about this, but there's a renewed talk of a new arena in Cincinnati. Nobody ever seems to know who's going to pay for it because there's no chance the taxpayers are going to pay for it after they got fleeced on the Bengals and Reds stadiums. But, everybody knows that the downtown arena in Cincinnati, which again was formerly the Riverfront Coliseum and has been 8 other things since then, is just a dump. And it was so much of a dump that when University of Cincinnati needed a place to play men's basketball for a season while they were renovating their on-campus arena, they went to Northern Kentucky and played there.
Go across the river. There's somewhere you can go.
It cost them 2 road games at Northern Kentucky to do it, and they lost one of those 2 games, which, they'll probably never play in KU again. But, it's definitely needed. But, yeah, concert venues are another probably interesting topic we could talk about at some point because you're seeing some of the small venues go out and you're seeing new ones pop up. I mean, the Brady Center in Cincinnati is one that we hear more events coming to. We've been to the Taft Theater for a building that's clearly dated. It's really nice. I
feel like there's one out in Harrison that I always get ads for.
Yeah.
That I've never been to.
But it's just a good reminder for the podcast to support local music wherever you are in the world because any chance you get to see bands live is a chance for them to continue to make a living and a chance to see live music, which there's nothing like it for sure.
Well, I think discovering your own acts is the way to go. Don't let anyone tell you what artists you should support. Find your own favorite artists.
Yeah, that's what we do each and every week on the podcast. We tell you who to support. Now,
yes, we give you options.
Yes, and that's why we make the playlist, or why you make the playlist, and why I paste the playlist, because that way you can actually check these bands out and see who's out there, because there's a lot of great bands out there, and we're going to talk about a few of them on this week's edition of Hard Rock Empire. And again, before we get to the ones we've chosen, we got the odds and ends of Mike's playlist, which this was a good week for that too.
Yeah, I kind of got derailed with the news bits there, but I thought those were 2 things worth bringing up. We don't talk news all the time, so figured why not.
Yeah.
As far as the major releases this week, we did have a new one from Crimson Glory, Chasing the Hydra. Talk a little bit more about that in a second. A new one from Hardline, which you will hear more about as well, the album Shout. Then there was also a tribute album to the 40th anniversary of Striper's To Hell with the Devil.
Yeah.
Legendary, really, that the first true like mainstream Christian metal band, I think. And
certainly the biggest, I think.
And you've had stuff since then, kind of more in the more modern rock era of stuff, but nothing quite like Stryper, I don't think.
No, I would agree.
As far as re-releases go, we have Game Over, the Italian thrash metal band, re-releasing their 2014 album Burst Into the Quiet. Kind of a big deal because they have it out on vinyl now. You can get the cool like marbled yellow version of it off Scarlet Records for $30. State of Illusion re-releasing their album from 2021, Pluto's Ghost, which to me, like, when you find out this is like a prog band, you think any band that releases an album called Pluto's Ghost, probably a prog band. That sounds like a prog album.
For sure.
But yeah, they decided to go ahead and like relaunch that 2021 album kind of in preparation for the new one to get it out there. What I've heard of it's good, so probably worth checking out as well. Then the multitude of albums that I listened to and really liked this week.
Yeah.
Starting with Anthea, their album Beyond the Dawn, California-based symphonic metal band. It's their third album. The track that they cut the video for, Phantom of the Masquerade, has really gone nuts online. It has over 200,000 plays. When you compare that and contrast that with the rest of the album, they definitely probably need to record a few more videos for that one. But album was really strong. They kind of have a mix of clean and harsh vocals. It's weird because listening to the album in its entirety, the first track was pretty much all harsh vocals. I could see maybe that turning people off, but since most people seem to be getting introduced to this band through that video, which is like the second track on the album, probably not an issue, but you know, if you did listen to the first track and you weren't sure, listen to the whole thing. It's really, really good. I mentioned Crimson Glory. It's the newest album from them. They were kind of a pioneer of American power and progressive metal in the early and mid 80s. It's their first full-length album since 1999's Astronomica, my bad. Band actually featured Todd Latour in the early 2010s prior to him joining Queensryche, so kind of an interesting tidbit there. Death Warmed Up released their debut album Wildcard. They are a UK hard rock band. It's got some like pop metal elements to it. I thought it was really good and kind of cool to see a brand new band generating a sound like that. So definitely someone to keep your eye on moving forward. Then we had Godsnake with their album Inhale the Noise, a German melodic thrash metal band. It's their third full-length album. It's got a little bit of a modern metal vibe to it, but not enough where you would call it modern metal, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like there are hallmarks to that I wouldn't attribute to them. But when you say they're a thrash metal band, I think people might think, oh, so their album sounds like 1985. And no, it doesn't. It sounds current. It just doesn't sound... It sounds modern without sounding modern, I guess. But definitely a cool album. And finally, Necrogoblikon released The Boiling Sea. From what it looks like on YouTube Music, it's got 6 new tracks and 5 live tracks. I listened to the new stuff, and it's honestly amazing. I don't know if there's a band out there right now that has a better blend of harsh and clean vocals as these guys do. The harsh singing is just so peculiar. It doesn't annoy me as much as other harsh style vocals, but... album also has a track featuring Real Big Fish. It's just them doing what they do, and it sounds great.
Yeah, it's those guys are always really solid. I did listen to the Death Warmed Up album, really enjoyed that as well. I do want to shout out, and this is probably on your name list, but we'll spoiler a little bit on that. The German power metal band Victorious with World War Dinosaur. I know that's outrageous, and if you look at the track listing, you're going to be like, that's outrageous. Those guys are really good. Like, I give them a lot of credit for something that's just way out there. It was one of my favorite albums of the week. It was a little bit too over the top to make that as my main pick, but I shout those guys out. Good work. Yeah,
that was definitely on there, and classic, obviously. Some of the other odd and interesting names. This one may or may not be odd, depending on how you pronounce the file extension. I will, until my dying day, pronounce it as GIF because that just makes sense to me. The band Gift from God.
Yeah.
With their new album, Dissimulation.
I mean, obviously they pronounce it that way. Otherwise, that joke is completely lost.
Unless you're talking about getting peanut butter from God, which would be fine, too. We got Crippled Black Phoenix with the album Seduheim. But really, Crippled Black Phoenix was the interesting part there. One that I think if nothing else, you should check out one track of the band Honey Bunches of Death.
Yeah.
Released their album Waste of Money, W-A-I-S-T of Money. Check out the track DUI number 5.
It's exactly what you think it is.
Absolutely. Amazing. We got Master Die, who has a pretty good sound, all things considered, but their album, their newest EP is MILF Queen.
Yeah.
So, all right.
I was kind of wanting to listen to that, and I thought, I don't know if I want to talk about that album on the podcast. So
They sound really good. That's the funny thing.
Yeah.
But, MILF Queen.
That is an interesting choice, but
Reeking Aura. Great band name. On the Promise of the Moon. I had to include Reeking Aura because that's fantastic.
yeah.
We got Severe Overbite with Evil Minds, their newest EP. And then finally, to your point, Victorious with World War Dinosaur. Man, there was just so much music of every style and whatnot this week. It was jam-packed.
Yeah, just real quickly, the I hope this doesn't start playing when I punch it up. In case you wanted, the track listing for World War Dinosaur includes Kingdom of the Strong, World War Dinosaur, Dino Race from Outer Space, Raptor Squad Attack, Brachio Bazooka Battalion, March to War, Evil Mean Megalodon, Dino Power Resistance, Prehistoric Panzer Power, Laser Ninja Thunderstorm, Golden Glory, and Lost Legacy. I guess they ran out of puns at the end, but
I'm not sure it gets worse than a Laser Ninja Thunderstorm. We get those sometime here in Ohio.
yeah, like I said, I know that's over the top. I encourage you to listen to it. I really enjoyed that, but not enough for it to be the picks for this week from either one of us. So it is time to get to our picks, and again, way too much good music this week. These were not the only 2 good albums, but they were the 2 that we're going to talk about, and they were really good. So, Mike, get us started with your pick for this week.
Yeah, so my pick this week ended up being the 6th studio album from the Argentine or Argentinian symphonic power metal band. They are Preludio Ancestral, and the album is Guardians of Twilight.
And who knew that was going to be a debate topic, is what is the correct form of someone from Argentina, but Reddit had a whole thread on it, as it turns out.
Yeah, it turns out most people are okay with either.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah, I'm totally in favor of that. Like I've alluded to earlier, picking this week was brutal. Everything I listened to was fantastic. These guys started back in 2005, and it's funny because there have been numerous bands over the couple years we've done this that I kind of lament not having listened to sooner or have not heard of yet, especially bands that have been around this long, but I think this is the first one that numerous reviews I pulled up pointed out that they were surprised that they hadn't heard of this band or listened to this band prior to now, given they've been around for 20 years. So I feel pretty good because at least I'm not alone there. The band consists of Sebastian Duarte on guitars, Javier Valenzuela on bass, Leonardo Gatti on guitars, Marcos Ortiz on drums, Luca Medina on keyboards, and Gaston Guillen on vocals. What caught my attention about these guys is that they can play really fast, they can do the whole neoclassical thing, but it never gets too over the top. To me, the songs still seem really well constructed. It's not just absurdity for absurdity's sake. I guess you could argue that when you have song titles like Flame of the Eternal Dragon and Vengeance of the Dragonheart, that maybe we have already drifted into the absurd, but, sometimes you just want to go and slay a dragon. I don't know. I think that's something that happens, and as far as I can tell, this is a tremendous soundtrack for doing that activity. Standout tracks on the album include Blades of the Burning Sky, Riders of the Crimson Storm, Flame of the Eternal Dragon, The Storm of a Thousand Wings, Twilight of the Hero, and the track that I picked to check out, Rise of the Golden Flame.
Check these guys out. This is Preludio Ancestral, with which I just noticed YouTube translated that title. Thanks, YouTube, on the chat when I typed that in there. This is their new album, Guardians of Twilight. This is the 7th track off of this album, Rise of the Golden Flame. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Yeah, what I've heard of this album, I really enjoyed. I haven't had a chance to get all the way through it, but exactly like Mike said, it's if you're out slaying dragons this weekend, I can't think of anything better to put on as a soundtrack to that activity than this album. It's really, really good.
You need something at the ready for when that time comes. You don't want to be empty-handed there and not have the right music for it. So yeah, just good stuff.
Yeah, really good stuff. Definitely check them out. Preludio Ancestral, Mike's pick for this week. Mike's already mentioned my pick. He promised we would have more about it. Let's talk more about it. And, sometimes you just have to go with the band and this is one that we actually talked a little bit about this album last June when I was doing my Run Through the Frontiers albums, and we said that this album was coming in early 2026. It is here. This is the 8th full-length album from the American rock band Hardline, and it is the new album Shout. The band currently made up of Johnny Gioeli on lead vocals and guitars, Alessandro Del Vecchio on keyboards and backing vocals, Anna Portalupi on bass, Marco De Salvia on drums, and Luca Princiata. I'm probably wrong on that. Apologies there on guitar. This is their first full-length album since leaving Frontiers Records. We talked about it as a news item last year that Alessandro Del Vecchio was leaving Frontiers, and it kind of makes sense that one of the bands he's very heavily involved with followed them out the door. This was a band obviously originally formed in 1991 by the Gioeli brothers, Johnny and Joey. At the time, the band also included Neil Schon and Dean Castronovo, who, of course, you would know best from Journey, which is kind of fitting since we're talking about Journey every other week on The Vault. Castronovo had come back to the band in 2019, but then left to reunite with Journey full-time again. We talked about them, as I mentioned, in June when I reviewed their 2021 release, Heart, Mind, and Soul. The one thing I noted then, and the one thing I'll note now listening to this, is Johnny Gioeli absolutely can still belt it out. This dude, I think, is 57 years old. I think I read somewhere in one of the reviews. I should have checked that. But, obviously I first encountered Hardline from their hit song, Hot Cherie. The dude had amazing pipes back then, and he's absolutely still singing just as great. He's clearly taking care of himself, which we've talked about artists that haven't. It's great to shout out ones that have. Obviously, Alessandro Del Vecchio is a musical genius, I think. Him leaving Frontiers is a big loss for their label, but continuing to work with Hardline obviously helps them out a lot. This is such an interesting album. I saw several reviewers kind of praise it as one of the best albums of the year so far, because it is really more than an AOR album. It does have a lot of different types of music on here, bluesy songs, some ballads, even some piano work, which is certainly Del Vecchio getting a chance to show off, and it's all really well done. Clearly, they wanted to make a point about their new start with a new label, and they've done that. I saw several reviewers say it was the band's best work since 2012's Danger Zone. If you're a fan of the band, you've probably already got it, but if not, this is a must-listen. Standout tracks include Rise Up, Rise Above, No Fear, Welcome to the Thunder, and the title track we're going to listen to is Shout. Let's check these guys out. It's Hardline with their new album, Shout. This is the title track and the opening track off of this album, so let's listen to a little bit of that now. But yeah, I really like this album. I thought I would. I was excited for it last summer, and it has absolutely delivered in what I thought it would be. Mike, your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I remember when the video for Shout dropped a few weeks back, thinking, okay, if the rest of the album's anything like this, is going to be pretty solid. So definitely not surprised to hear that it was. That's, again, just another album in a list of tons that came out this week that were huge. But yeah, I enjoyed what I heard.
Yeah, like you said, these guys are really good. It's great to see them continuing on and still making great music all these years later. So definitely check out the new release from Hardline out on April the 17th. If you're watching on Twitch and you're not subscribed, we do have to run a 90-second ad break. Twitch requires us to do that. We tried to stall it as long as possible, but we are almost out of time installing it. If you're on YouTube or if you are subscribed, and again, you can do that with your Prime membership for free once a month. We're going to just chat a little bit during the break. You won't miss any content. We'll come back on the other side with the vault. But for those who are on Twitch and are not subscribed, you're going to have a 90-second break. We'll be back on the other side with the vault. We encourage you to stick around through that. And the ad break is now running. I wasn't sure if we were going to get there because I only have one more snooze left. And I figured I always like to save that just in case we run a little long at the end. But yeah, this was such a huge week in music, and I wish. Obviously, there's no way to tell the labels like, "Hey, I need you to release stuff that I like every week."
Yeah. Pace yourself, please.
But this was a really strong week, and one band I don't think we mentioned, but I was kind of intrigued by it was the one release from Frontiers this week. Generation Radio includes members of Rascal Flatts, members of Chicago, members of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. There's a lot of covers on there, which I thought were really good. I've not gotten the chance to listen to their original stuff other than the track on the playlist, which is certainly a little bit more country, but I think the Rascal Flatts guys clearly singing there. But really talented guys. I'm really kind of curious to see what the rest of that album sounds like.
Yeah, it's interesting because logically speaking, you would want to promote the country sounding song because just that sells better.
Yeah.
But as far as when I'm creating my playlist and I have one track to kind of decide whether I want to listen to an album or not, for my taste, that ended up doing it a disservice. Now, I'm obviously not the majority here, and I realize that. I'm sure a lot of people heard that and wanted to eat it up, and, that's a smart move on their part. It just didn't really help me.
Yeah, and like I said, Jason Scheff, of course, has been the longtime one of the big vocalists for Chicago. In fact, he joined the band when Peter Cetera left in the mid '80s, and it has been there's a lot of their hit songs in the late '80s that you probably know. But Scheff was the one that actually was singing on those on the album, and not Cetera because he had already departed. So he's got a great voice. There's a cover of "You're the Inspiration" on this album that I thought he still sounds great singing. So, if you're a fan of those acts, that's one I don't want you to lose under the radar this week. It's probably one you're going to want to check out.
Did Cetera not sing that originally?
He did sing that one. Yeah.
I was saying, wait, I'm certain that's Cetera, right?
Yeah, he sang that one. But no, there were other hit songs later on that he did not sing. But no, he did. This is a cover of that one. But obviously, he's probably sang it more than Cetera at this point because Cetera has been gone since the mid '80s, and
that's a weird one because you just wonder the people how the breakdown of the crowd to see Chicago is, because I'm sure there's a decent sized portion of their fan base that's like, I don't really want to hear this.
Yeah, probably not.
Even though that song was huge.
And Chicago's probably going to be the next band I dive into when I go through all the different albums, which is going to take a while because there have been a ton of Chicago albums. But that's one I still would like to see. I'd still like to see them on tour. I've always been a big fan of Chicago. And I really like stuff from all eras, so I think that kind of makes it work out well. But if you were watching ads, welcome back. We're talking about all kinds of stuff on the podcast. It's time to get into the vault where Mike and I will talk about a couple classic albums. And Mike is wrapping up a gimmick this week. It is the end of the preview of bands that are coming to Sonic Temple, just because Sonic Temple's coming up next week. So looks like you're ending on a high note based on what I know you have chosen for this week. But let's get into what you got for the vault.
Yeah, I'd mentioned weeks ago that I would kind of jump around stages and days here toward the end because there was just no time to hit everything. As far as this one went, I wasn't really sure where I wanted to go with it at first. And a conversation that I had with Chris on Discord the other day, kind of in reference to the concert he's seeing tonight, kind of gave me the idea like, hey, maybe this is who I'll pick. We have, Friday, stage 1, I believe, at Sonic Temple. We got the band Stone Temple Pilots, who I followed them like anyone my age through the 90s and early 2000s. But really, since their current lead singer joined the band, I just haven't really paid much attention to them, and probably my fault. I probably should have, but it gives me this great opportunity to jump into one of their newer albums now. So my choice this week is going to be their newest album from 2020, and that is Perdita.
Yeah, I'm really curious about this because I was a big fan of STP as well in the 90s. And like you, not that they did anything wrong other than I just didn't keep up with them. Because until we did this podcast, I was very bad about keeping up with new music unless you literally threw something in front of me. So, yeah, I'm definitely curious to hear about this new album or newer album.
Yeah, so I probably don't have to go too deep into the history of the band. Like I said, most people around our age will be familiar with any of the tracks off their first 3 albums, Core, Purple, Tiny Music Songs from the Vatican Gift Shop. Love those albums back in the day. Even number 4 had tracks like Down and Sour Girl, and Shangri-La Dee Da had Days of the Week, which is a solid track.
Great song.
They had their comeback album in 2010, which I thought was all right. Had some decent songs like Between the Lines, Take a Load Off, Hickory Dichotomy. But after that, just kind of dropped off. I'd kind of moved on. Sadly, Weiland passed away. They brought in Chester Bennington for a couple years. He left, and then sadly also passed away. In 2016, they launched a search for a new singer, who was announced a year later as Jeff Gutt, who had previously been the singer for a new metal band called Dry Cell. He's been in the industry for a while, but was also the second-place finisher on the X Factor USA Season 3, which I don't know the singing competition shows very well, but it seemed like he was a dude that was too established to be on a singing competition show. I don't know if the X Factor has different rules. No idea. Not important. So with him, they released another self-titled album in 2018, and then the album that we're talking about today in 2020, Perdita. Unknowingly at the time, I ended up picking a gimmick album. This is mostly acoustic, recorded using vintage instruments, so that's kind of interesting. Metacritic gave it generally favorable reviews. Paste described the album as the sound of a band stretching beyond its own self-imposed limits to challenge what a so-called acoustic album can be.
Okay. How do you do that?
Thought-provoking, really. Spin suggested it could be the start of a new career path for STP. Rolling Stone was less favorable, giving it a 2 out of 5 and called the album generic.
Okay.
I think an album like this actually lends itself to how the DeLeo brothers write. I think going back through the older STP stuff, they had a lot of really good songs that at the time, the only way I could really describe them is unconventional. They weren't like the normal hard rock you were used to listening to. And obviously, acoustic album using vintage instruments, just, that's seems like something they would do. Would I like to hear a Pops Love Suicide or Tripping on a Hole in a Paper Heart or Plush on this album? Sure. But, an album kind of dedicated to the slower side of STP actually works pretty well. Mm-hmm. You think back to tracks like Still Remains, Big Empty. Let's see, what was the one off? Lady Picture Show.
Yeah.
I knew there was one off.
Love that song.
The third album, but yeah, it's just they do well writing weird songs, and I think that kind of the folk acoustic rock thing works well for these guys. Standout tracks on the album include Fare Thee Well, 3 Wishes, Perdita, I Didn't Know the Time, and Miles Away. Also, Jeff Gutt, his vocals, really good. I feel like, and Chris will be able to attest to this, whether or not this is the case or not later, but his voice seems like he would be able to pull off Scott Weiland's vocals pretty easily live, so I'm kind of curious what that sounds like. But yeah, if you've slept on STB for a while, maybe also check out the album before this if you're not looking for straight just acoustic stuff. Uh-huh. But this album was actually pretty solid.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to check it out myself. Like I said, I was a big STB fan and excited to see that they're still out there doing their thing, and hopefully their concerts go well both this weekend and next. And I may have to check those albums out, but great to see those guys continuing to get after it after all these years. I'm running through 2 gimmicks on the vault. Of course, I mentioned earlier last week, and again next week, we're running through all of the Journey studio albums. We have gotten into the Steve Perry era, so things definitely have changed on that front. They've gone from being a prog band to a pop rock band that was going to become hugely popular and successful. But every other week, I'm going through the list of one-hit wonders off of Wikipedia, and I'm going through and picking one that I like. And we're going through and finding the album that it came off of and seeing whether it should have been the only hit off the album, what is going on there. So along those lines, 1972 gave us a classic song that we came across years ago, and it just for whatever reason. I honestly, partially because of David Letterman, because he used to sing it on the show. Don't know how that happened, but it got us into this song, and it leads us to the fifth studio album by the English glam rock band Mott the Hoople. The album is All the Young Dudes, and that is the one-hit wonder in question. It was released in 1972. These guys came from Island Records with their first few albums, didn't really see a whole lot of success, moved on to the CBS Records label, which is Columbia Records here in the U.S. This was kind of their turning point. If you're familiar with the story, they were struggling and on the verge of breaking up when David Bowie stepped in, because evidently he must have been friends with them or something, and he offered them, he sent them, the band, a demo of a song called Suffragette City. And the band's like, no, we don't think that's it. And so they turned it down. So then he wrote and gave them All the Young Dudes. And it turned out that was kind of the one. Bowie and Mick Ronson produced the album with the tracks arranged by Ronson, which took Mott, quote, from potential has-beens to avatars of the glam rock movement. Turns out that Bowie would end up performing this song with the band, and we'll get into that in a moment. Quickly, the band itself was made up of Ian Hunter on lead vocals, Mick Ralphs on guitar and backing vocals, Pete Overend Watts on bass, Dale Buffin Griffin on drums, Verdon Allen on organ backing vocals, and of course Bowie performing on backing vocals on All the Young Dudes as well. And then the expanded version of this album, he actually has a version of this song that he was the lead vocalist on, singing along with Hunter. So if you want to check that out. The album itself was a commercial success, peaking at number 3 or the song, I should say, was a commercial success, peaking at number 3 on the UK singles chart, number 37 on the US Billboard Hot 100. I mentioned Bowie performed with the band on November 29th of that year. That helped the band kind of boost their reputation. As it turns out, 20 years later, Bowie and Hunter would again perform the song as a duet with the surviving members of Queen, Mick Ronson, and Def Leppard's Joe Elliott and Phil Collen at the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. So kind of makes sense there. 2004, Rolling Stone ranked All the Young Dudes number 253 in the list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. That eventually was moved up to 166 on the 2021 revised list. It is one of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. John Savage of The Guardian ranked it the 5th best glam rock song of all time in 2013. It is clearly the biggest hit on this album, as I was telling Mike off the air. The first half of the album is a little bit on the rough side, and other than All the Young Dudes. There are some tracks in the second half that you can kind of see them putting it together. I enjoyed those a little bit more, but you have to think if Bowie doesn't step in for these guys here, we probably are not even talking about Mott the Hoople. Standout tracks on the album include All the Young Dudes, Jerk and Crocus, One of the Boys, and Ready for Love / Afterlights. And notable about this song is Ready for Love was reworked by Mick Ralph's subsequent band, Bad Company, on their self-titled debut. So, it's worth a listen if you're a fan of All the Young Dudes. I don't know how much of it you're going to enjoy. Like I said, about half of it I really dug. The rest was maybe not as much. But interesting and clearly, a band that was in the right place at the right time to get help from David Bowie, who was on top of the world at that point and was going to continue to be on top of the world, and allowed these guys to not only make it, but kind of cement their place among the early stages of glam rock right alongside Bowie.
It's funny looking at the track list, and I always wonder what it's like when you're listening to something on vinyl, because in the CD and digital music era, track list, like the order of the tracks doesn't really matter a whole lot, I don't think.
Yeah.
But I just think looking at this, starting your album with a Velvet Underground cover,
and it's rough. I'm just going to admit.
I'm not a huge Lou Reed fan.
Yeah, that definitely hurts.
And I just think that kind of maybe sets it off on the wrong foot to begin with. I mean, you mentioned All the Young Dudes being the first kind of standout track. I don't know why you don't open with that. And I don't know. I'd have to listen to it to kind of get my own opinion, but to me, Was
Lou Reed a bigger star in 1972 than David Bowie, that you would think, well, we're going to start with the Lou Reed cover because everybody's going to know who Lou Reed is. And then here's this David Bowie song. Like, it's hard to imagine Bowie wasn't already a bigger star, and especially where they were looking to go, than Lou Reed.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't, because I mean, I think Lou Reed was certainly a bigger star over there than he ever was here.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I kind of have to compare the two. Lou Reed had already released several albums with Velvet Underground. Looks like this was 1972, right, for all the young dudes.
Yeah.
So he was just kind of getting his solo stuff out there at that point in time. As far as Bowie goes, kind of similar time frame.
Okay.
His first David Bowie album came out in 1967. First Velvet Underground came out in 1967 as well. So it's hard to say, honestly. He might have been a little bigger at that point in time.
Yeah, it'll be interesting I have to assume that maybe that's the only reason why you would throw that on there first before all the young dudes, which is clearly the song that was going to propel them into superstardom, to whatever degree that they reach that. But it is, because like when I listen to the album, that first song, I'm like, man, if the rest of this album sounds like this, I'm going to struggle to get through this. It does not. If you listen to this album just to kind of go through it, if you're not a Lou Reed fan, it gets better after you get past that first song.
I mean, Space Oddity for Bowie came out on his second album, so 1969. So, I don't know.
Yeah, interesting stuff. But,
yeah, for sure.
Definitely worth checking out. Coming up in 2 weeks, we'll be back to this gimmick, and we're going to talk about the clowns to the left of me and the jokers to the right. We're going to be checking out the album from Steelers Wheel coming up in 2 weeks. That should be interesting. There were a couple of other options for that year, but the albums were either kind of hard to find or not sure the rest of the album, like Hocus Pocus came out from Focus. I'm not sure I want to listen to a whole Focus album.
It could be amazing.
It could be interesting. I might do it anyway just for the laughs, but we're going to check out Steelers Wheel. And, of course, Steelers Wheel, as we'll talk about in a couple weeks, one of the band members of that of Steelers Wheel is Jerry Rafferty, who, of course, would go on to do a bunch of stuff, and it might even show up on this one-hit wonder list on his own a little bit later on. But interesting stuff, as always, when we get to the vault. You never know what we're going to find. And the Mott the Hooples, all the young dudes, definitely worth checking out. It's time for us to check out on this edition of the Hard Rock Empire. Thank you so much for listening once again. We'll be back with you again 1 week from right now, or 1 week from an hour ago, I guess. 7 o'clock Eastern Time next Sunday night. The music of April the 24th coming up on next week's edition of the Hard Rock Empire. So we hope you'll join us then. A big thanks to Chris for joining us in the chat. Hopefully he has a good concert tonight. Big thanks to Mike for all his hard work on the podcast. Big thanks to Stoveleg Media for their continued support. And a big thanks to you for listening whenever and wherever you are listening to us. We'll talk to you again next week for another episode of the Hard Rock Empire. Until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Hard Rock Empire.